Yeah, there's people who've done definitely less.
Well, boys, what I was interested in talking about tonight, even like because we didn't talk about it last week, and um, I think it is interesting, and it's probably worth a bit of airtime, is the Audi Sauber deal. So we've got a bit more clarity about what's happening with Sauber. Their Audi are signing a works deal with the Austrian team. Engines will be made in Germany, and then the team will still be based out of Austria. Very similar to the old BMW Sauber deal that was done in the early 2000s. Um, Great news for the sport, great news for manufacturers. I don't think it's going to be official till 2025, although Sauber will lose Ferrari or Alfa Romeo sponsorship at the end of, is
Next
it
year,
this year or next year? Next year.
2023.
Yeah. So now that there's a bit more clarity, a bit more confirmation, what do you make of it? I think it's a great thing for both parties involved. I mean, developing the infrastructure for um, like having to develop the infrastructure is quite expensive. However, the only thing that is interesting to me is Andretti wanted to come into the sport, put their money where their mouth was, had everything theoretically in place to make that jump, shut down straight away. You've got a team like Audi, obviously a bigger name globally, um, but literally zero resistance was put into it, into them coming in, considering the hullabaloo that was made about Andretti trying to join the sport.
Well, I guess
I
that was
think,
because
okay.
they wanted to take or enter a new team, whereas Audi's buying or partnering with Sauber, who's already an existing team, so the distribution of funds stays the same, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I think it's stupid. Andretti should be allowed in. How good would it be to see 22 cars on the grid?
But like even the thing that was interesting to me is like there's obviously they know that Andretti wants to join the sport. At the time, Audi wasn't coming into Formula One. It would have been very easy for them to say, "Hey, we're
Yeah,
losing out."
we didn't know that, but you don't know what they were talking about behind the scenes.
Yeah, fair enough.
Like you think about if you think about it on the timeline, it all makes sense now. From the minute they stopped their endurance car program, it looked like at the time it was because Volkswagen didn't want to spend the funds on a Porsche and Audi, competition in the same sport. But now it looks like it was um, because they're just trying to, keep their pennies for going into the big market. I think, like Harry eloquently said, when you're buying into a team, totally different because you're not changing the money that comes into the sport for the other teams. So realistically, I don't think they give a shit who comes in terms of buying a team. I
Mm.
think for me, the disappointing thing is that, yeah,
I see. Sorry, just to cut you off. Formula One makes the team coming in pay an inordinate amount of money to cover those costs for the first 3 or 4 years that they join. It might be something like 200. It's a ridiculous. I don't know if it's
Yeah, it's huge.
200 million or something like that. They make them pay up front that much money to cover those teams from the handicap for the first couple of years.
yeah.
So that doesn't add up. Anyway, besides the
Well,
point, but let's
I've
talk
been
about
against.
Audi, the positives of it.
I think it's always great news when OEMs join any sport. Um, like it's another engine manufacturer. It's another manufacturer that can get onto us the privateer teams as well. It's another engine option, which I think is great. I don't think realistically it's gonna like I'm interested to see how they go. Like that's the one thing I'm interested in. I'm also interested to see if success comes hard, how long they stay. Like
Mm.
they're my main questions because Formula One, I don't think for like Audi doesn't really have a history in Formula One to stay and stick it out if it doesn't go well. Like it's not like Honda or Ferrari, where we know where the sport is sort of steeped in your history. Even Renault, like
Well,
Audi,
we
I don't think.
touched. Mm. We touched on it last week, and there's probably a question to be had about, you got these new teams, these new manufacturers that are joining the sport. There's a level of prestige with the sport. There's a level of excitement about joining it. However, if you come in there for 5 years with very limited levels of success, when does, particularly with a company like Audi, when does the board say, you don't have that $300 million budget anymore to go racing every year, we're going to give you 50 million. And then all of a sudden racing in Formula One doesn't seem so doable anymore. And then you look at kind of what WEC has done to limit costs, and it makes it a lot more of a simple transition from, that into this. So I guess they need success.
If you look at what they've done, they're coming in at the start of the next sort of wave of, technical regulations. So they're coming in on a sort of clean slate. They've pretty much given themselves 4 years to, build a championship winning, or build a good team, to, put the pieces in place for the team to build a good car. They've also given themselves a window to even build an academy and woo some drivers that they're going to need, to hit the ground running. So I think from the outset, they're doing everything right. They're not rushing into it. I'm happy. I'm genuinely happy to see another big, manufacturer come into the team. My only reservations are, if they don't get success, how long will they stay? And then also, if we do hit a time where, we have like another GFC, the problem with stacking up the grid with a lot of OEMs is that when a GFC hits, a lot of OEMs always pull out together, and then the fabric of the sport, in terms of the smaller teams you nurture and keep your midfield, isn't there, because it's been lopsided to a lot of high spending teams. So I'm not against it. It's just, in the practical realm, when disaster strikes, and disaster always strikes, it's always a matter of time. Do you have the backstop to sort of fill up that grid and not have a sort of a shambles looking grid for a year or two? Like, that's where the reservation
the HRT, Caterham.
That's why, like, when you have a 24 car grid, you can then drop to 20 for what's been 8 years now. But when you have a 20 car grid and you lose an OEM or two, and you, like, at the same time, you have to then pick up a lot of cars quickly to actually put on the show that you're putting on, because it's very hard to put a Formula One team together. That's my reservations. But in terms of the short term, I think it's great.
What if they are successful, right? Audi, Germans come in like Mercedes, solid for a few years, and then bang, take off. You'll have Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull powertrains, Renault.
It'd be the best team for Formula One, because it would bring.
Yeah. What happens to McLaren, Aston Martin, Williams?
Williams, I think,
who are customer teams. McLaren, Williams have some of the biggest history in Formula One. Do they become Haas equivalents?
No.
I think they're already Haas equivalents.
No way. No. I think the cost cap should keep them relevant. This is the other thing, right? All of those teams that are somewhat struggling are a regulation away from resolving.
Peaking.
The problem is the regulations come around every 5 years, which is probably too long. But I think if you had a new team come in and have success relatively quickly, then whether it's new OEMs coming in like a full capacity, starting a team from scratch, or even just as an engine supplier, they're going to be looking to invest or to partner with those teams that are struggling, who need the engine. So I think any success that Audi has to increase the competitiveness of the grid and make it seem like there's a level of a team being able to come in and have success quickly in Formula One is only going to strengthen the teams at the bottom. They're coming in to the sport with Alfa Romeo, who hasn't done a whole lot with the Sauber hasn't done a whole lot in the last 5 years. So if they're able to bring up a team that's lower in the field I think you find other manufacturers or even just engine suppliers who'd be willing to do the same thing.
Even if you look at the teams like Williams, it would probably be, if it wouldn't be a bad idea to even make a partnership to be, and to get their engine supplied by Audi year one anyway, in terms of probably getting some of the better service of a engine manufacturer, because it's all new and fresh. And then for the off chance that they have put all their ducks in a row and they actually have a decent power unit, you could be benefiting from years of not having to race and develop, and just development like we saw from Mercedes. So I think them smaller teams, it is getting harder with more OEMs, but you can also build your own luck and sort of chart your own course. And it's like you see like last year or even the start of this year, how Haas pretty much went from dead last to a relatively competitive car, or the beginning of the last generation where Williams went from back markers to consistently top 6 running cars just from having the right engine in their car. So there's always opportunities to rise up the grid. I think it's the hard part is maintaining that success. McLaren, I think, will have the hardest run of it though, because I think they're the one who exudes that they like that they belong with the big boys kind of thing, and they're it's like they're always talking up the fact that they're nearly there and they can get there, and they always fall short, or they don't, not even sometimes fall short, they just fall well, like this year they fall well short of the mark. But
it's going to be interesting. I think their success in Formula One is Formula One's overall success, which is really important. Boys,